and ready.
So Nico, delighted that you're here at Aviadev. You know, Fast Jet's undergone a lot of change over the last 18 months, and you know, are you now at a good platform that you can start to now look ahead to really develop the project across Africa?
I think that, thank you very much. I do think that we are nearing a point of greater stability within the business. Over the last 18 months, we've effected a number of changes in the business, including a complete refleeting process. We exited A319 aircraft, entered E190s, ERJ145s in Zimbabwe. We launched new operations in Mozambique. So I think that the business is, the underlying performance of the business is improving. We've relocated head office to be now on African soil. So the business is in a much better shape. More work has to be done, but I do believe we've now got a stable platform and a business model that can take us forward profitably going forward.
And we like as an industry to put banners on things, and we make a big deal about low-cost airlines. Effectively, you know, maybe the low-cost mantra doesn't exist anymore because all airlines want to have low costs. You know, what is Fast Jet as an operation nowadays?
Look, I think that the Fast Jet as a business is aiming to be a cost-efficient, reliable, safe and effective operation. So all essentially that we've done is we've changed the gauge size. Now, that does not imply that we now do not wish to use our aircraft assets productively, that we don't want optimal productivity out of our people, and efficiency throughout our processes and systems. So as a carrier, we remain a cost-effective carrier that provides direct point-to-point services, but equally collaborate with international long-haul partners, feed and de-feed passengers onto their services. So in that manner, we cover both domestic business and tourism traffic as well as international business and tourism traffic.
Now, in the past, Fast Jet in its previous life faced lots of problems, effectively of not being an African carrier, the barriers to trade in certain parts of the continent. Are you finding it easier now to be respected within Africa, now you are a proper African airline?
Look, there's no doubt that there's a symbolic value in having the headquarters being based on African soil, and in that instance it has helped somewhat. It has further helped that over the last 18 months I've repopulated the management teams both at a holding company level as well as in-country, and localized resources to the extent possible. Fast Jet 2 years ago was operating on predominantly foreign pilots, for example. Now, that does not help establishing relationships within the local communities. We have changed that, and we've seen that the local communities have embraced us more. The reality, though, is that Africa has 54 independent states, each of its own sovereignty, each of its own processes, procedures, and regulatory environments. And it remains difficult to navigate. We're far off from having one uniform place that's called Africa. But it is getting better progressively, slowly but surely.
And you're established in Tanzania, you're established in Zimbabwe, you have the project in Mozambique as well. You know, how are you approaching different countries to be able to deliver a Fast Jet formula to their markets?
Look, first and foremost, I think that Fast Jet, what does Fast Jet stand for in the eyes of the consumer? So a lot of our focus is firstly at that commercial consistency, that price points, those operational consistency across the markets where the Fast Jet brand can be found. Now, how we deploy the brand in each market in terms of ownership structures, partnerships and so forth, varies on a country-by-country basis, really a function of what's the level of country risk, political risk, economic risk, the social environment and makeup in each country, what is the air transportation potential and existing demand levels in each country. All of those factors fundamentally inform how we choose to enter a specific market, whether or not we wish to own a controlling stake, for example, in the operation in that particular country, or whether we want a diluted commercial exposure. So historically, Fast Jet tried to approach each one of these countries with a cookie-cutter type of standard formula, which is quite frankly disrespectful in terms of the nuances and individual scenarios that exist in each country, and simply does actually not meet up with consumer requirements.
And just a couple of questions we're asking everyone here is, firstly, you know, there's a lot of issues in the African continent for it to actually deliver what can be expected and the potential it has. What would you say is the biggest issue that is facing Africa, and how can we get around that?
I think that ultimately, potentially still protectionist type of behavior or underlying sentiment. No, so yes, Africa is a continent of aviation challenges, but to the same extent it's also a continent of aviation potential and opportunity. The continent, 1.2 billion people, 30% of the world's mineral riches, 20% of the land mass. That's a substantial untapped opportunity that sits there. Today on the continent we've got about 6 million high-value jobs being supported by aviation, $80 billion in economic activity being supported by air transportation, and about 80 million passengers as well on the continent. So it's already a sizable industry and important to all sectors and all governments. However, it can be so much more if we could step away from this underlying protectionist behavior. That's the primary point. Secondary point, the market is still very fragmented. 200 odd carriers, there's probably 150 more than there should be.
And just finally, I know it's early days here at the event, but it's really good that you're here. What's been your view on it, and why are events like this so important to be discussing opportunities for Africa?
Well, look, I think that aviation is a complex value chain overall, comprising both suppliers, operators, and importantly the regulatory environment and stakeholders. So opportunities and events like this provides an opportunity for collaboration, for dialogue, for insights, for sharing knowledge and information. And that's why I do support events like this. The important parting message, though, is that it cannot continue being talk shop after talk shop after talk shop. There needs to be some tangible results and actions coming out of it, and hopefully some good long-lasting partnerships and commercial agreements flowing.
Thanks a lot, Nico. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just get just your name and surname and who you represent?
Nico Fast Jet, Chief Executive Officer, Fast Jet PLC.